This is going to save you definitely months and probably years in your Spanish learning journey because there are thousands of English words that map perfectly into Spanish. And all you have to do is learn the mapping codes, the patterns. You don't have to learn the words themselves. I'll show you exactly what I mean. Anything that ends in tion, shin, is going to be cion in Spanish. That means if you know the word conversation, you already know the word is going to be the same in Spanish with a little different pattern at the end. So learn the pattern. Tion becomes cion. Conversation becomes conversación. So what you have to change is just the Spanish accent. You say the same word, but you just change your accent. Conversation, conversación. Likewise, necessary. If you learn the little pattern that RI words stay the same in Spanish, but the ending changes to rio, you know that necessary is going to be necesario. Commercial is going to be comercial. So again, you just change your accent once you've learned that the pattern is identical. Anything ending in ty, activity. You know the word's going to be actividad. All right, and then the same goes with a whole bunch more that are coming. And just to solidify the pattern, I'm going to show you the next line would be words like nation become nación, dictionary, diccionario, because it ends in a ry. You're going to say the same word and change it to rio at the end. Essential, esencial, reality, realidad. Frankly becomes francamente, but we'll get on to more because look, there's a whole lot more. There's 17 patterns I'm going to teach you today. And I want to show you that although the video is just a minute old, you've already learned something. What is the word for information in Spanish? If I said to you information and you had no idea, which maybe you don't, what that is in Spanish, tell me what you think it's going to be. I'll show you you've learned something already. That's right. Información. A little accent over there. That's it. If you don't know me, my name's Rob. I learned 6 languages over the last 20-something years. And my entire community of Spanish learners and all of my success has been built around looking for the shortcuts. I was always trying to figure out, can we learn a language in weeks instead of years? And the hundreds of people that have gone through the layers method will tell you, I'm always preaching about this, my biggest discovery. There are 90,000 words in Spanish, but a native speaker only knows 30,000 words. In a normal day, we use about 1,000 words, and 80% of what we say every day is just the same 300 words over and over. So we always focus on mastering words and phrases with those top 300 words first before we expand out. We learn one layer of the onion at a time in order of importance, the layers method. There'll be 2 links below this video, one to the free course, which is the first couple of layers of the layers method, and then one to the full layers method, the paid program. That's going to be all the layers that get you from beginner to conversational and all the future layers that I'm making as we progress. Now, are all the words we're going to learn today inside those top 300 that you want to focus on for daily conversation? Hell no. All right. Some say the patterns I'm going to show you today actually give you access to over 3,000 words. Now, some of them are not going to be useful at all, but some of them will be very necessary. There's that word, necessary. Obviously a word that you need as you do the word conversation. All right. Many of them won't be essential to you. There's that word. But you are going to have the ability, whenever you need one of these words, you never even have to have learnt it before. You're going to know it instantly. You're going to know what it is. Okay, I want you to remember 2 things before we get started. The first, you don't have to learn these words, right? You're learning a little pattern. You're learning the end patterns, and there's quite a few. There's 17, but that means you don't have to learn any words, all right? Second point I want to make is, all you have to learn is the exceptions. Let me show you what I mean. So here we have the tion words, and at the bottom in blue I have a couple of exceptions. Those are the ones that don't follow the pattern. Those are the only ones you actually have to learn. All right? Some of those exceptions won't even be that useful to you, so you can decide, I don't want that one. But words like explanation, Translation is probably much more useful than the word explanation. So you can pick and choose which of the exceptions you want to memorize. I'll make them very clear when you see an exception. So the lesson plan is as follows. I'm going to take you through these patterns one by one, show you the list of all the words and exceptions. We're going to talk about whether you can figure out if it's masculine, feminine, which is another huge bonus that you get. For example, as I showed you with information and conversation, this pattern is always a feminine word. All right, so you get a huge bonus that you know that it's going to be la conversación every single time. And a lot of them share a pattern like that. And then we're going to give you some sentences, some practice sentences. I'm going to say, how would you say this sentence using these words? And I'm not going to show you the words. So we'll figure out at the end whether you've actually committed these to memory, these patterns to memory, and you've figured out how to use these words without ever having learned them. Okay, let's go. And when you finish this video, it's time to pick up your cheat sheets and your flashcards and go through all the examples I've given you to test yourself and commit the stuff to long-term memory. If you're not part of the Layers method, my Spanish learning community, there's going to be 2 links below, as I said, one to the free one, which will give you the first couple layers, and one to the full program. That full program is a paid program. It's $29 a month, and it's going to include this layer that's launching today. So that'll give you access to all the hundreds of flashcards that match up to this layer to test you to see whether you've committed these to long-term memory. Okay, you've learned already that the ending shin in English is ción in Spanish. And I mentioned that you know it's going to be a feminine word. So let's talk a little bit about masculine, feminine words that we have in Spanish. If you're a beginner, you won't know exactly what to do with that information. And if you're kind of intermediate, you might need a little refresher as well. So, you can have an object, a thing, that is masculine or feminine in Spanish. Okay? There's another type of word in Spanish that changes between masculine and feminine. We're going to get to that a little later. Okay? But effectively, the most important masculine or feminine things in Spanish are things. What do I mean by that? Well, you know, if it's a thing, you know, in school we learn the word noun, and I try to stay away from these grammar terms, but these are nouns, these are things. And you know if it's a thing, if you can put the word the in front of it. Can you say the conversation? Yes. That's a noun, that's a thing. Can you say the nation? Yes. The education, the information, the situation. All of these are nouns. All of these are things. If they end in shin or sion, they're all nouns. That means that they're going to have a gender. They will be masculine or feminine. So, if you wanted to say the conversation, it's going to be la conversación. Conversación. I need to spell it in the Spanish way. All right, you know it's going to be la. What's the other word for the in Spanish? Well, you have la and el. In this video, we're gonna make sure that la is red. Let's move that out the way. And el is blue. Okay, so just for the sake of this video, we're gonna use that color code. Now, all of these ones are reds. La conversación, that should be red. Now, if you can say the before a word, you can also say a. Okay, so you can say a conversation, a nation, an education, same thing. You can't really say a information because it's like normally a group of things. A situation, an organization. Well, what's the word for a in the feminine form? It's una. Masculine form is un. So it's the and a. The and a. So if you can say the conversation, you can also say a conversation. That's going to be una conversación. Just checking if you guys were awake there. Una should be a red word. You know that every single one of these words is going to be feminine, and that just means that it's going to have a la or an una in front. You would never say el conversación. You would never say un conversación. You would always say la conversación or una conversación. These are feminine words. Let's point out one more little thing here. Sometimes you have a C in English before the T. Okay? Attraction, action. So in that case, you would pronounce it action in English, and in Spanish, acción. Attraction, CT over here. Atracción. Direction, dirección. In other words, the first C is a hard sound, and the next one is that S sound. This is different in Spain. I've told you before in other videos, you can use the pronunciation I just did in Spain. It's completely acceptable, but the majority of Spanish speakers in Spain, the C, these C's are a TH sound, like the word the. So it becomes conversación, nación, educación, información. And then when we get down to these double C's, like action, it's going to be acción. Attraction, atracción. Cool. Here we see connection. And suddenly, conexión. Suddenly they use an X. Okay, but that's just the way they chose to spell it. But think about this. If you said conexión with this spelling, conexión, it's going to be the exact same pronunciation with an X. Conexión. Okay? The only exception here is if you're in Spain, you're going to say conexión and not conexión. Conexión doesn't make sense in Spain. It's conexión if you live in Spain. Okay? If you do live in Spain, I recommend that you just stick with that S sound. I've said it many times. It's a lot easier to say. And then little nuances like I explained here won't even matter to you. You can forget what I just said if you just stick with that. Let's move on to the exceptions. Okay, 2 exceptions. The word explanation. You can't just automatically use the pattern. You have to memorize this one. This is the only word, well, 2 words that you have to memorize. Explanation is explicación. Translation is traducción. Traducción. Okay, it's time to see if you were listening. I'm going to cover up those. Remember the pattern, and how would you say the situation? The situation. Think about it. The is going to be la, because it's feminine, so it's not el. Situación. How would you say a competition? A competition. Well, a is going to be una. Competición. Good job if you got that right. Why do we have this accent here, guys? Why do you need this accent on the final O? Well, in Spanish, I always say this, these accents are not actually very important. They don't give you a change of meaning, except for about 1 or 2 words that I know of. They just show you where to stress the word, where to put the emphasis on the word. So, in English, situation, the natural stress is on that A. Situation. But in Spanish, they're basically telling you not to do the natural thing. You know, instead of saying situación, which would kind of be the natural way to say it, they're saying, no, there's an exception here. That's why we're putting an accent. You have to change the natural way of the flow of the word and say situación. So you don't say competition, competición. You say competición. All right, so it's just telling you where to put the loud part of the word. All right, how would you say, I need protection? I'm giving you a whole sentence here. I need protection. You're going to say, necesito, I need. We all know that one. Protección. Okay, so now we have that accent. So as I said, the emphasis on that end part, protección. And I've given you this one because we have that double C. You have to pronounce the first C as a hard C, and then the next one as a soft C, as an S. Necesito protección. I need protection. Okay, before we move on to the next pattern, I want to point out that there is one word I could find in English that actually ends with the cion instead of the tion. Can you guess what it is? The word is suspicion. And obviously that's going to be the exact same thing in Spanish because it's already got the C. All right, it's time to move on to the next pattern. So this pattern is very similar. Words ending in sion are going to also end in sion in Spanish. There's a lot less of these words, and of course they remain feminine. So one thing just to point out here is when you see a double S, like admission, it's always going to be single S in Spanish. In fact, this happens, I would say, most of the time. When there's a double in English, there's a single letter in Spanish. Okay, so aggression, agresión. Again, remember that hard sound at the end because of the accent. Decision. We say decision, they say decisión. Right? They put the emphasis in what seems like an unnatural place. And after speaking Spanish for a while, you'll find that's actually more natural to you. You're just so used to throwing the stress at the end just because you've said the word or the pattern many, many times. Okay, as you can see, there's no exceptions here like we had with these blue ones here. But I would say that comprehension, comprensión, I wouldn't class it as an exception purely because these H's in Spanish are always silent. Right? So there's no need to add it in here because you're not going to pronounce it. It's just one long air sound. Comprensión, comprensión. So if you added it in or not, it wouldn't make a difference to the pronunciation. I also want to point out confusion. So this FU sound, actually in English we say few, confusion. They never do that in Spanish, okay? You just say the U, not the U. So confusión, not confusion. Don't add the extra sound. I don't know why we do that in English. Something to do with Old English, I guess, but it's not done. Just a quick side note. I think this is super interesting. You might not. Why do we have this pattern match? Why do the IONs exist in both English and Spanish? Because English and Spanish have two completely separate roots, but somehow they cross over in this place. In Western Europe, you have all the languages in Western Europe are divided into either Latin root or German root. So English comes from German, Spanish comes from Latin. So if you didn't know, French obviously came out of Latin, and that's how they got them. The French ruled England, I think it was in the 1000s, and the language of England was French. And so they basically forced everyone to speak French in England. And when they eventually kicked them out and they left, they just kept a lot of the very useful words. So all of these words came into English, these tion words, through French. And they came into Spanish through Latin. They took two different routes, but now we have a massive crossover. Okay, test time. And remember, these are also all feminine words. How would you say the tension? La tensión. Okay, I'm not going to do the accent right now. I'll just save a little bit of time. How would you say an expression? So an is the same as a. The word for a, feminine a, is una. And we're going to remove that double S. So una expresión. Okay, let's do a sentence. How would you say, I'm going to take a decision? Now in Spanish you say take a decision. You don't say make a decision. I'm going to take a decision. And that word take is tomar, to take. So it's going to be, I'm going to take a decision. I'm going to tomar, to take, una decisión. Voy a tomar una decisión. The next pattern, necessary, necesario. Dictionary, diccionario. So that stress is on that A towards the end. Voluntario, voluntario. Voluntario. Okay, some of these are masculine, some of them are feminine. And I've put some of the feminine ones, in fact, all of the feminine ones here at the bottom. We've got 4 of them. And they can be a little bit tricky. In fact, let me just enlarge these so it's a little bit easier to see. So they can be a bit tricky because some of them have an accent on the I and some of them don't. We have glory is gloria. Victory, victoria. But then factory becomes factoria. And we know that because you have the little accent on the I. So it's not factoria, victoria, gloria. It's factoria. Category, likewise, is categoria. All right? It's a feminine word, so you're going to say la categoria, la factoria. You know that because it ends in an A. And the ones that ends in an O, you know they're going to be masculine. I'll quickly point out some of the exceptions. Stationary pretty much stays the same, but you add this S, this ES to the front. So, estacionario. And then that's actually a common pattern. You're going to see it quite a few times. The Spanish, when they do an S at the beginning of a word, followed by a consonant, that T, sta, stationary, they can't say it. They can't seem to say it without adding an E beforehand. So you know, if you see an S with a consonant coming, it's going to be ES in Spanish. Estacionario. All right? And then these last 2 are just like a little different. The word summary is not sumario, it's resumen. And the word preliminary is preliminar, without anything at the end. Okay, let's do some practice sentences. Okay, first, without looking, what's the word going to be for secretary? It's going to be secretario. What's the word going to be for obligatory? Obligatory. Obligatorio. Obligatorio, with the accent on that O. Okay, so for the sentence, I'm going to give you an exception because it's a very useful word, actually. And I want you to learn the exceptions if they're useful. I want a summary. How do you say that in Spanish? I want, quiero. The word for a is going to be un because the next word is masculine. Un resumen. I want a summary. Quiero un resumen. Remember we said earlier, if it's a feminine word, it's una. If it's a masculine word, it's un. And you can see down here the word summary is resumen. Okay, there's one more thing that is actually quite important to mention about these. And I'm not going to show you this now, but it's going to come up later. A lot of these words, because of the type of words they are, they can actually change to an A at the end. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm going to show you what I mean later. And that's because they're not things, okay? They're not cups or tables or things like that. So they don't have a fixed gender. They actually change depending on the sentence. Moving on, the next pattern is ial, ial. Commercial, comercial. Essential, esencial. Social, social. In the accent of Spain, social. Okay, not much to say about these. If you can think of any word in English that has ial at the end, in fact, it's actually even better than that. If it has an al at the end, in fact, I need to modify this. If it has an al at the end, so it's not just the ials. You have this whole list. Like if it's national, nacional. Okay? If it's rational, racional or racional. So it really extends to anything with al at the end, whether there's an ial or an al. Okay. If you know any of those words in English, you already know them in Spanish. So that's pretty cool. Except for these ones. These words are excepcional. When I go down to the bottom, the blue words. These are the only ones you have to memorize. Okay? That should be very motivacional for you. Because you only have to learn 4 words that I could find that don't match this pattern. Financial, financiero. Special, This is what we spoke about earlier. Let's come back to this one. Influential, influyente. It's a little bit different. Influyente. And then informational is not informacional, it's informativo. So just learn those ones, and then this special isn't even that different. It's just the fact that I said earlier, when you have an S and then a consonant, SB, the Spanish, they just can't pronounce that. They have to automatically add an E beforehand. They can't say special. They have to say especial. If you see a Spanish person speaking English and he says the word, I'm very special, or you are very special, in English, they can't say that. They have to say, you are very especial. They just have to, okay? It's pretty funny. That's why it's not called España. The country is España. So it's a little bit of a running joke. They just can't seem to say it, and so in their spelling, they've added the E before any S. So if you see any word like, we said stationary earlier, estacionario, which is over here, or special, you know it's going to be especial. You have to add that E. Okay, I'm going to use this opportunity to teach you a new word. So you're going to say, you're going to say, he is very excited. The word excited in Spanish is actually emotional, right? That's the word. So in English, he is very excited, but think of it as emotional. He is very emotional. Let's put it over here. Let's make it a little bigger too. And we're going to say, he is S. Very, muy. Now think of the word emotional. Emocional. He's very excited. Put that there so you can see it clearly. All right. Now, let's try and use some of those exceptions. Okay, so have a quick glance at these exceptions here. We're going to use one of them. We're going to say, I work for a financial company. All right, so we're not going to say financial. Trying to remember what that word was. So I work for a financial company, or a finance company. So we're not going to say financial. We're going to say the other word. And I work for is going to be yo trabajo. I work para, for, un negocio, a company. Now, you'll probably know this if you've done layer 6, describing things. You've got to make sure that your describing word, which is financial, a company that does financial stuff, comes after the actual company, all right? Comes after the thing. The thing you're describing comes after the thing. Whereas in English, it comes before. What type of company? Financial company. So we say a company financial. Or a company that is financial, you can think of it. And instead of financial, it's going to be what? Financiero. Okay? Let's make that a little bigger. Yo trabajo para un negocio financiero. If you don't know why it's para and not por, the previous layer is a whole lot of por versus para, and you'll know exactly why. Okay, and if you don't know a little more about these adjectives, these words that describe the thing, sometimes, as I said in the last section, they can have an A at the end, sometimes they can have an O at the end. It really depends on this word here. Is this masculine or feminine? And I'm slowly bringing in this topic so that when we get to it in a second, it makes a little more sense. Okay? The reason financiero has an O in the end is because negocio has an O in the end. And it's a masculine word. Okay, let's move on to the next pattern. Okay, this is a very interesting pattern because they don't look anything like each other. But activity, actividad. Reality, realidad. Okay, so it even goes down the list to words like city, which you wouldn't even think is kind of one of these words, but it is. And there's just a slight spelling change in the middle. That's why I've made it as a blue exception. Instead of ciudad, it's ciudad. Ciudad, Spanish accent from Spain. Ciudad. Ability, again, there's a silent H here. You don't need to pronounce it. So act as if it's spelled the same way. Habilidad, ability. Stability, remember, all we do is we add that little E. Estabilidad, because they can't say stabilidad without putting the A in front. Sensitivity, you would think is sensitividad, but no, it's sensibilidad. Sensibilidad. So that's something you definitely have to remember. Although it's not a very practical, useful word. Equality, you can see how these actually do look the same. Igualdad. Igualdad, equality. Mobility, this is essentially the same thing. It's just the fact that in Spanish, a B and a V are pretty much interchangeable. So you could pronounce this movilidad or mobilidad, and it doesn't even matter because Spanish people, they kind of interchange the B's and the V's and the way that they pronounce them. One day it'll be this way. The next day the same person will pronounce it mobilidad instead of movilidad. So don't get hung up on when you see that, on how to pronounce it too much. If you want to know what to defer to, you should lean more towards the B sound whenever you see a B or a V. Okay, let's give you guys a little test. Okay, keeping in mind that these are feminine words, la, una. How would you say the unity? La, unidad. Remember, ty becomes dad. How would you say the creativity? La, it's a bit of a long one here. Creatividad. Right, notice how I kind of said a B sound on the V. La creatividad. Other thing to notice, when a word ends in D, like all of these do, you can do like if you want to sound pretty cool, like a real Spanish person, you can do like a TH sound. But you don't sound it out loud. You just kind of end the word there. Unidad. Creatividad. So you kind of just put your tongue there. You don't have to push it like a th at all. And you're going to really go a long way. This isn't important, but you go a long way to sounding like, wow, you got a good Spanish accent. La unidad, la creatividad. Try and say that. And let's do a little practice sentence. I live in the city. Try and think of how you would say that. I live in the city. I live, you can say yo vivo, or you can just say vivo. That's okay. Notice how I'm saying those B sounds. Vivo. En. La has to be la. All of these are feminine. Okay? All of them are feminine if they end in dad. And city ends in dad. The ty changes to a dad. And this is an exception, which is why I'm giving it to you. Because it's not just an exception, it's a very, very useful word. Ciudad. Yo vivo en la ciudad. Okay? Or Latin American accent. Yo vivo en la ciudad. Okay, words ending in ly. Naturally, naturalmente. Frankly, francamente. Completely, completamente. These are pretty straightforward. There's no masculine, feminine necessary to even think about here. Let's look at the exceptions quickly because there are quite a few. Once again, I've made this an exception because it has the E added to the front. So you would say specifically or específicamente. There's a little accent over here, específicamente. So you know where to put the emphasis. Okay, the word for happy in Spanish is feliz. And that's why this is felizmente, happily. The word for quick is rápido. Okay, so rápidamente. That's why these words are a little different here. The word for slow is lento or lenta, lentamente. The word for easy is fácil, easily, fácilmente. This one's just a slight difference, seriously, seriamente. And the word for calm, you can say calma, calma for calm, but tranquilo is normally the word for calm. So that's why calmly would best be translated as tranquilamente instead of calmamente. So that little calmamente that I said, this actually happens quite a lot just to help it flow. Completely, completamente. There's no on the English side, okay? Effectively, effective, mente. All right? Particularly, particularmente, not necessary to add the but if there is a little gap, right? Direct, you don't say directamente. You need to fill that gap before the mente. There's a gap. And you fill it with the actively, active, mente, activamente. Okay? Okay, let's see if you can remember some of those words. Let's see. Okay, I got a great sentence for you here. You are going to say, let's put it on this side. Normally, I speak slowly. Normally, I speak slowly. How would you... Ooh, I need to hide these. All right, don't look, guys. Don't look. Normalmente. Normally, normalmente. Is there a double L here? There must be a double L in normally. My mistake. Normalmente. Remember, as I said, the doubles become singles when you translate to Spanish. Normalmente, I speak. You can say yo hablo. Or you can just say hablo. You don't need the yo. And the word for slow, this is one of the exceptions at the bottom of the list. Slow is lenta. Mente. Lentamente. Okay. Normally I speak slowly, so we got two of them there. Normalmente hablo lentamente. This is one of the easy ones, guys. Let's move on to the next. If you haven't signed up for the layers method, this is where you will find hundreds and hundreds of flashcards and practice exercises that you can do on your phone for this exact module. Right, this is one of the modules, one of the layers of the layers method. And there's going to be two links below this video. One is just to see if you like the layers method. It's the free version where you get the first couple of layers of the onion. And you see the method and you see how the flashcards work and how they help you commit these things to long-term memory. You can hear the pronunciation of the words on those flashcards. The other link is going to be to the paid version. That's $29 a month. It's the Spanish-speaking community with members from all around the world. And that's where you will get access to every single layer that takes you from beginner systematically to a 10-minute conversation using the 300 most common words and phrases that we need for everyday conversation. So click one of those links below if you want to try the free version just to check it out, or if you're ready to dive straight into the paid version. The links will be below this video, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you inside. Okay, this one is, again, very easy. There's no masculine, feminine to worry about, and there's just a couple of exceptions at the bottom, one or two of which are pretty useful. So, any word that ends in ate in English is going to be an AR verb. If you don't know what an AR verb is, this is layer 4. Make sure you go back to layer 4 of the layers method and check it out, and you will notice that a verb will either end in AR, ER, or IR, and that's it. This is really reinforced in, I think, layer 7 and layer 9. You will really get a good picture of this, and it's going to help you a lot when you understand that. So when I talk about verb, I'm talking about action words. These are doing things, all right? So to activate, you can put the word to in front of it. To appreciate, to educate, to eliminate. Okay, you can't say to cup. You can't say to hair, to jacket. So these are actions. And in English, a lot of the ones that end in ATE, in fact, every one of them, that's going to be an AR verb. Okay, so it really, really helps you to get a lot of action words, a lot of verbs, and look how important some of them are. Like the word, I think, educate is something that's very, very useful. Communicate, it's a very, very useful word you need all the time. I can't communicate, it's something you might say a lot. So let's look at the exceptions quickly, because those are the only ones that you're going to have to change a little bit. All right, demonstrate. We basically remove the N. Demostrar. Translate. Completely different word entirely. Traducir. That's not an AR verb, but we're not even looking at the same word, really. Okay? Traducir. Hesitate. So you wouldn't really say hesitar. Dudar actually means to doubt. So they're not going to use the word hesitar, hesitate. It's rather that you're doubting. That's why it looks so different. And then stimulate. Again, we just add the E in front. Estimular. Let's do some practice. Okay, first sentence. Let me first hide the words. We're going to say, I want to educate myself. Any ideas? How would you say that? I want, quiero or yo quiero, either one is fine. Educate, well, you know it's going to be educar. Remember, not educar, like in English, educate. It's just as you see it. Don't add any extra sounds. Educar. Myself is me. Okay, so me means me or myself or to me or towards me. Now, the thing is, when you have a me like that, after a word that ends in R, you always stick them together. Okay, so it's a separate meaning, separate word, but it's not a separate word. It's stuck onto the end. I'll put that in, let's put that in red so you can see that clearly. Yeah, red. Quiero educarme. I want to educate myself. Okay, now I'm going to give you an exception. You're going to ask somebody, let's say you're traveling, can you translate this? It's a question. Can you in Spanish and you can are the same thing. We don't switch the word order around. You can, puedes. You can and can you. Translate. Remember, this is a very different word from translate. It's not translar. It's an exception. Traducir. Puedes traducir. Can you translate this? Esto. Okay, we should have an upside down question mark here, but I don't have that on my keyboard. Puedes traducir esto? Can you translate this? Let's move on to the next pattern. And if I go all the way back to the first pattern we learned, the IONs, remember, again, there was an exception. Translation is traducción. Traducción. So if I copy paste this and bring it back here, you'll see how these are related. Traducir, traducción. The translation, remember these are always feminine. La traducción. If you wanted to say, what is the translation? ¿Qué es la traducción? What is the translation? Okay. ¿Puedes traducir esto? Or ¿qué es la traducción? What's the translation? Moving on to the next one. It's the same thing. We have AR verbs. Okay, so simplify, simplificar. So that fi becomes ficar. Justify, justificar. Clarify, clarificar. Let's look at the exceptions. When you have this Q sound at the beginning of a word in Spanish, it's often going to be a CU in Spanish. Qualify, cualificar. Specify, you know what's going to happen here. They're just going to add an E to the front. Especificar. Exemplify. So that X sound is going to be a ejemplificar. Same word, but just that's how they pronounce the X. And they change it to a J. And then this one's a little different. It's like the word terror with A in front. So aterror, izar. Aterror, izar. Very, very different. That's one of the big exceptions. All right, little test. Okay, none of these are super useful words in real life, so I'm just going to give you one little practice sentence, which might be very useful to you, which is, can you simplify the sentence? The word for sentence in Spanish is frase, la frase. It's like phrase. All right, so how would you say that? Can you simplify the sentence? Can you? Puedes. We did that before. Simplificar. la frase? Can you simplify the sentence? Yes, there should be a question mark at the beginning, upside down, but I don't have it on my keyboard and I have to go and copy paste it. So just imagine that it's there. By the way, if you're sending someone a text message in Spanish and you don't put the upside down question mark at the beginning of the sentence, nobody cares. Okay, you can just relax. You can do things a little more relaxed. People are going to understand what you mean. No problem there. Let's move on to the next pattern. Okay, let's spend a bit of time on this one because a lot of these words are very useful. These are describing words. Now, I've shown you earlier that things, nouns, change from masculine and feminine. They will always be either masculine or feminine. The table under this computer is always going to be masculine, la mesa. And a glass, let's see if I can get an actual glass. Let's just pretend this is a glass. A glass would be un vaso, and vaso with a V, and that's masculine. It's never going to be feminine. Okay, so let's just pretend this is a vaso and not a copa. And so we have feminine and masculine things. Words that describe these things will change their gender depending on the thing. So if this table under here gets described, okay, that describing word is going to change its gender to match the table. I can describe it as a red table, and now it's going to be mesa, la mesa roja, red, the table red. And I can describe it as, I can describe this as a red cup. Now it's going to be, let's imagine this is vaso. Let's get my actual glass here. Un vaso rojo. All right, so rojo, roja, rojo, roja. The reason I'm saying this is because these are all describing words. None of them are the color red, roja, but they're going to change, and now we're going to work with that a little bit, okay? So, for example, famous becomes famoso, and I, as a male, am going to be famoso, but you might be a female, and you would be famosa, all right? That's why over here I've said masculine or feminine. Famous is going to end in a vowel. It's either going to be the A or the O. Okay? I've put them all as O's for now. But when we do a sentence or two, we will change some of them to masculine. These are the two types of words that change gender in Spanish. The things and the words that describe the things. The things will remain masculine or feminine, but the things that describe them will just match that gender, so they will be the only ones that change gender. The describing words change gender. Adjectives, we learned that word in school. They describe these things. Okay, before we do some practice sentences and try and change the gender, I will look at the exceptions with you. So these are very, very useful words, so I would highly recommend memorizing most of them. You don't have to memorize these ones, so remember, because you just know the pattern. If it ends in OUS, it's going to be oso or osa. Okay, fabulous, fabuloso or fabulosa. Now, these ones are worth memorizing. Dangerous, very, very useful word. Peligroso, cautious, cauto. Poisonous, it's not venemoso, there's no M here. Okay, it's not venomous. It's venenoso. It's kind of hard to say. So that's also the same word for venomous. If I change this to venomous, it's venenoso, not venemoso. Obnoxious, odioso. Atrocious, not that useful, atroz. Studious, there's that E at the beginning. The rest of it is the same, estudioso. Spacious, same thing, espacioso. Continuous, continuo, an exception. Prosperous, próspero. You know that song? Feliz Navidad. And then it goes, prospero año, prosperous year. Prospero año. Varios, various would be varios. Or, If you're talking about some feminine things like various women, it would be varias. These are going to change. Varias mujeres, various women. Okay, so that should have an O there. And then harmonious, you're just removing the H, silent H, armonioso. Let's do some practice words. Okay, practice sentences. First one, let's cover those up so you can't cheat. I know what you're like. I am nervous. Okay. I'm going to say it as a man. You're going to change the ending as a woman. Estoy, I am. I'm going to say nervioso. Nervioso. And you might say estoy nerviosa. Just describing yourself. And that self, that estoy, that I am. Let's put the word I in. Yo. That yo is either male or female. And that's why this word is going to match that. Change gender based on what it's describing, right? It's describing yo. It's describing I. And I could be masculine or feminine. This just reminded me of one thing. You see how we have, some of them have OUS, and that's also. Some of them have IOUS. Then it would be curioso. Okay? Mysterious, misterioso. So that I would be there just like it is before the OUS, it's there before the also. And there's actually an exception when it comes to nervous, because there is no I here. So just remember that. This should actually be a blue word, because it's not nervoso. It's nervioso. Does that make sense what I'm saying? We've thrown in a superficial I in Spanish that doesn't exist in the English. So that's kind of an exception. Whereas everywhere else, the I's there because the I's there in English as well. Okay? Right, next sentence is going to be, the food is delicious. Be careful because the food is feminine. Alright, so the word is comida for food. So it's going to be la comida. That ends in an A. It's a very good indication that it's more than likely feminine. La comida is S. And now we know we can take it from here. Delicioso or deliciosa. Well, we have to match the thing we're describing. It's got to be feminine, okay? La comida es deliciosa. If we said something, I don't know, what's something masculine that you can eat? The bread is delicious. El pan. The bread is el pan. Es delicioso. Why so? Because pan is masculine. How do I know it's masculine? Well, not because it ends in an O, because it doesn't, but because I can see that word el. The word for the is masculine for pan. I can see it in the sentence, so I know straight away it's going to be delicioso. Okay, let's do an exception. A very, very useful word. Dangerous. He is dangerous. Let's say the man is dangerous. A little easier. The man is dangerous. El hombre. Clearly that's going to be masculine. Es peligroso. By the way, if you haven't done layer 3 of the layers method, that's where you will understand. Sorry, I've made a mistake. You caught me out there. But that was just a test, just to see if you were watching. Peligroso. Layer 3 is where you're going to become super comfortable with what's masculine and what's feminine. There's going to be loads of practice exercises and cheat sheets for masculine and feminine in layer 3. If you don't understand why hombre, why it ends in an E, but yet it's masculine, then, and why this doesn't end in an E or an O, but yet it's masculine, well, layer 3 is where we practice the masculine, feminine stuff. Okay, now we're going to do the same sentence, but we're going to say the woman. The woman is dangerous. What's it going to be? The word for woman is mujer. And of course it's la. La mujer es peligrosa. All right? El hombre es peligroso. La mujer es peligrosa. So now you can see why I've been alluding to this a little earlier on. Sometimes in these patterns we're learning, the translation on the other side could be ending in an O or an A. As a default, I've just made them all end in O's, but be aware that that can change. Okay, and I spoke to you about this one as well. Let's do one more practice because it's very, very useful. If you want to say many times, various times, lots of times, or different times in Spanish, you would actually say, let's just say many times. The word for times, plural word, is veces. Veces. And that's a feminine word, right? The times. Let me just go one step back for you. Una vez, one time. You know it's feminine, even though it doesn't end in A, because this word una is feminine. It's referring to, it's pointing to the fact that it's feminine. Una vez, two times, dos veces, but it's still feminine, okay? Now, many times, feminine word veces, we're going to say various times. In Spanish is how they say many times or different times, okay? And we're going to say varias veces. I've been to Spain, I've been to Mexico, varias veces, many times, various times. Okay, if you wanted to say many men or many boys, niños, yes, there is supposed to be a little enya there, and I'll do it just to please you. Then this is going to change right there. So you see, there's a bit of an exception word because the changing is not right at the end because there's an S at the end, okay? Varios niños and varias veces. Cool. So these words will change for masculine and feminine. Why? Remember? Because they are adjectives. They are describing words. And they change to match the thing that they're describing. The thing they're describing might be feminine, might be masculine. If you want to learn more about the describing words, if you haven't really done that yet, it's layer 6. Layer 6 in the layers method will make it super clear and have loads of practice sentences and cheat sheets and flashcards for adjectives describing things. Very important. Next pattern. This is exactly the same story. These words describe things. All right, the movie is very graphic. Es gráfico. However, a movie is feminine. So you would say, la película, the movie, es gráfica. I don't even know if you can say that. Okay, so pretty straightforward all the way down the line. If you know the word for organic, then you can know the word it automatically is orgánico. Okay, have a look at the accents. So the stress of the word is not exactly where you think it would be. So we say scientific, and in the same way in Spanish they say científico. So you say it the way you would say it in Spanish. I mean it. Okay, have a look at the accents. They're going to tell you where to stress the word. So instead of saying gráfico, específico, científico, no, you actually put the stress a little earlier, and that's why they've put the accent on all of these words. Fantástico, dramático, artístico, económico, which is actually the way we say them in English. Artistic, economic, academic, académico. Very, very easy, these ones, because they're just like English. Okay. I need to point out, though, some of these words, if you think about it, remember I've been telling you about, you have things, you have the nouns that can be masculine or feminine, and then you have the describers that describe those things, that change gender based on what this thing is going to be. Now, there are some patterns, some word patterns, that might be an adjective or they might be a thing. Okay, they might be a describer or they might be a thing. And there's not many, but have a look here. Here's a great example. The story was public. Okay, I'm now giving you an adjective, a describing word. The story went public. So I'm describing the story as what? As public. Okay. However, there's a different word in English called the public. That means the people, the public. Now that's a thing. That's a noun. We have two words in English that look the exact same. One is a public story, and one is the public. Okay? And I think that's the only word in this list that's like that. But basically, I've put it at the bottom as a separate, different word. And if it's a noun, right? It's a noun. So essentially, these words that end in IC, they're normally describing things. Okay, the exception here is the word music, which is a thing, not describing anything, happens to end in IC, and it's música, la música. Okay, let's do some practice sentences. Okay, I'm going to use the most common words that we would actually use from this list. We're going to say, my car is electric. No, let's say I have an electric car. How about that? Think about how you would say that. Okay, the word for car we're going to use is the one from Latin America, which is carro. So, yo tengo, I have, or you could just say tengo, un carro eléctrico. Just like in English, the stress is going to be on that E there. Okay, eléctrico. And in Spain, you would say coche. Yo tengo un coche eléctrico. And then you're going to say, it's fantastic. Very, very, I'm sure you've all heard this word. You don't even need to learn Spanish to know this word. Es is the word for it's. Fantástico. That accent on the A. Cool. Actually, let's do one where we change this to the feminine. Okay. How about yo tengo una moto. That's a motorbike or a scooter, one of those scooters. Una moto. Now I know I'm saying this is feminine because it ends in the word una ends in A, una, but this ends in O. Why is that? Well, because it's moto, I think it's cicleta, which actually ends in A, but for short they just say moto, una moto, eléctrico. Is it eléctrico? No, it's eléctrica. Now it's eléctrica because we're talking about a feminine motorbike or scooter, same word. And then I'm going to say, it's fantastic. Now I have to change this one too. We're still talking about the motorbike, which is feminine. Es fantástica. Okay, let's move on to the next pattern. This one is so easy, you don't even need an explanation. I mean, look at it. It's literally, if it ends in NT, it's going to be NTE. Same whole word, okay? Excellent, excelente. Consistent, consistente. Couple of exceptions. Violent, violento instead of violente. Imminent. Now we have this weird inminente. Not a very useful word. Dependent, dependiente. There's an extra I added. Significant, very different. Significativo. Now, let's do a couple of practice ones with some of the most important and useful ones. For example, how would you say, it's not very important for me. Think about how you would say that. Okay, so when you say it's not, the word for it is just S. It is. When you say it's not, you got to put the not part in front. and it's no S. It's not, no S. Very is muy. Importante, for me, para mí. No es muy importante para mí. Okay, I would say that's probably the one word on this list you really need. Everyone knows excelente already. Importante is a great word you can use very, very often. Okay, so this I've actually put next to importante because if you change the form of the word, you got all the exact same words. Constant, constante, constancy, constancia. Okay, patient, paciente, patience, paciencia. So I've used all the same words here. It's just a different form of word. Okay, so these words here are describing things. Okay, the tree. So what happens when you change the word endings in English from important to importance? You're actually just changing it from a describing word to a noun, an adjective to a noun. Okay, so you can say the person is important, or the important person. That's describing the person. But then you can say the importance of blah, blah, blah. Now it's a noun. It's a thing. Importance. Constancy. These are all things. These are all nouns. That's why they can be gendered like this, feminine. And they all happen to be feminine nouns. The abundance, right? I have an abundance of food. If you can say a or an or the, then you know it's a noun. So, not very important to know that, but I just wanted to explain to you why these ones aren't gendered and these ones are. And you might be saying, oh, but you said to me earlier that adjectives are gendered. They match the gender of the thing they are describing. Yes, but there's actually no opportunity to do so here because these guys don't end in an O or an A, right? So an adjective that doesn't end in an O or an A can't change its gender, okay? That's why. It's just because it ends in an E. You can't change its gender if it ends in an E. Cool. Let's do a couple of practice words. We'll do one practice sentence. The most important word on this list that you're going to use in real life is patience. I don't have patience. How would you say that in Spanish? I have, yo tengo. I don't have, yo no tengo. Let me show you the answer. Or you can just say no tengo. And then the word for patience is going to be paciencia. No, paciencia. Paciencia. No comment. Paciencia. No tengo paciencia. I don't have patience. Words that end in OR in English end in OR or Spanish. Words that end in OR in English, they end in OR in Spanish. Actor, actor. Director, director. Inventor, inventor. As you can see, these all describe, not women. My goodness. As you can see, these all describe people, and these people might be female, okay? So, director would then change to directora. So that's why I've said masculine or feminine. It could be or ora. Look at some exceptions quickly. Governor, it's not what you would think. Gobernador. Sponsor is more like patron. Patrocinador. Juror, jurado. And translator, this keeps coming up. Remember, we've had this a few times. To translate is traducir. Translation, traducción. Translator, traductor. Let me show you quickly the list of feminine words. So in the feminine, all of these would simply get an A on the end, except for actor, which becomes a little more like English actress, actriz. Okay, so a female translator, oh, I got this one twice, would be traductora. Okay, let's do a sentence or two. Okay, how would you say in Spanish? My Spanish teacher, my female. Okay, we don't have to say the word female like in English, you have to specify. My female Spanish teacher is my mentor. Okay, so we got two of these OR words, huh? Sorry, I should actually say professor because it's an OR word. And we're using that pattern, changing the ORs into Spanish. Okay, my Spanish teacher, mi profe. So we're going to say teacher of Spanish or professor of Spanish. In Spanish, you can't say the Spanish teacher, you have to say the teacher of Spanish, the professor of Spanish. Mi profesor a de español, my professor of Spanish. And how would you say is my mentor? This is a female. Es mi mentor a. If this was a male teacher, you would say mi profesor de español es mi mentor. And that would be male. Male. Next pattern. Words ending in ISM, they end in ismo. Realism, realismo. Nationalism, nacionalismo. Now remember earlier we said nation. There's the Tion, becomes nacion. So we've actually added two of these patterns together here. Nationalism, nacionalismo. So if you saw this word, you'll be able to work out both patterns. You'll be able to work out that that's going to be a cion and that the ISM at the end would be ismo after going through this lesson. So some of these things compound, as you can see. Let's make this a little bigger quickly. Right. Let's look at the exceptions at the bottom. But before I do, I'll point out that these are all things. They are masculine things, always. Okay, so you can say the realism, the nationalism, the capitalism. And that's how you know it's a thing. And it's always masculine. It's not going to end in A. Okay? Looking at the exceptions, one of them ends in A. Criticism. Instead of criticismo, it's crítica. And it's la crítica. So that's the only thing that's masculine here. And then anarchism, I've made it an exception, but it's actually the exact same. It's just that instead of that k sound being ch, they've decided to replace that with a q, and then that's always followed with a u. So it's pretty much the same sound, it's just a bit of a different spelling. It's not a word you're going to use very much, so don't stress about that. Criticism is actually quite an important word, so we're going to use that in our practice sentence. Okay, practice sentence. This is going to sound a little advanced, and who knows, maybe you'll need this. I'll try and use two of the most popular words on this list. But first, let me cover them up. There is much criticism towards feminism. Criticism towards. Okay, you're going to learn some words here that are going to actually be very powerful. Feminism. That are going to be very powerful and useful in other situations. The word for there is, it's one word in Spanish, which is hay. Much, mucho, criticism. Okay, criticism is not criticismo, it's an exception, and I'm giving it to you because it's very useful, very common. Criticism. Critica. Okay, we saw that a second ago. And I said that it's the only thing on this list that's actually a feminine word. La crítica. So we have to change mucho. Okay, because mucho, believe it or not, is actually describing criticism. I know that sounds crazy, but get used to the idea that the word mucho, mucha, is always matching the gender of the word that it's talking about. There's a lot of what? Criticism. That word is feminine, so mucha has to change. Okay, so all of what I've just shown you here, I is a massively important word. There is. Okay, is there a bar here? It's a very, very important word. And then mucho changes to mucha. Towards, this is a very useful word. Hacia. Okay, hay mucha crítica hacia. And then feminism, they actually say the feminism. All right, so we don't say it in English, but we're going to add in the word the, and it's always masculine. I know this is confusing because you're thinking of women here, but the word itself has a gender. It's nothing to do with the people. The word itself, anything ending in ism, o, is always going to be a masculine word. Feminismo. So there's quite a lot to take in there. All right, you might need to rewind that a couple times. Hay mucha crítica hacia el feminismo. There's a lot of criticism towards the feminism. Okay, feminism is a masculine word. And likewise, if you're talking about these isms, you're always going to add the word el, the, in front of them. El socialismo. The optimism. El optimismo. The pessimism. El pesimismo. So talking about that, all of these words are going to have an el in front of them. You wouldn't just say socialism, you would say the socialism in Spanish. El socialismo. El optimismo. The optimism. If you wanted to say I hate pessimism, you wouldn't just say odio pesimismo. You would say, let me actually write that down. You would say odio, that means I hate. Odio, I hate. El pesimismo. So I hate the pessimism. In English, we don't say the word the in that case. Okay, so these ones, as you can see, again, I've copied over from the previous list. So realism, realist. Nationalism, nationalist. So again, one of them is a thing, and then one of them is like describing people as nationalists or realists, etc. Make it a little bigger for you there. Now, these are actually quite interesting because if you're a male realist, it's still realista, okay, in Spanish. If you're a male socialist, you would still be called socialista. You wouldn't be called socialisto. This is a special category of words in Spanish where they do describe things, and as I keep saying, describing things, adjectives, they change gender to male and female and back again depending on the person or the thing they're describing. But not these ones, okay? So these ones where I've got the blue and the red here, look, both of them I've made an A at the end. Male and female are always an A at the end. For this, ista sound. So if you are an activist as a man, activista. Okay, there's a couple of exceptions here. I should actually put these ones in blue because if you can look carefully, they don't end in ist. All right, so on this side they do end in ism, but on this side they don't end in ist. So that's why they don't match. We don't even need to discuss that. But if they do end in ist, it's going to be ista at the end. And then this blue one over here, the ch is just replaced with the q, anarquista. So it sounds the same, but it's spelled slightly differently. Cool. Let's do a practice sentence with a couple of these. Okay, let me hide those away from you, and I'm going to say something that's probably the most useful words on the list. I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. How many times have we said that? I'm not a pessimist. Think about how you're going to say this now. While I type it out. Comma, I'm a realist. Okay, and whether you are male or female, doesn't matter. It's going to end the same way. Remember that. I am is soy. I am not is no soy. Okay, no soy. Now, in this case, we do remove the a. Okay, oh, sorry, I should have put the a here. I'm not a pessimist. But in Spanish, we actually do remove the a when we're describing ourselves in this way. No soy pesimista. As a man, I'm saying pesimista. If as a female, you say pesimista as well. Soy realista. So we use the same word and we remove the word a when we're describing ourselves in this way. Okay, we're nearing the end, guys. We got, I think, 3 of these left. And then you know every single pattern there is in Spanish. Let's get through these ones and then we'll finish up. So, these are clearly describing people or maybe things as well, but they're describing things. So, back to our normal adjectives, normal describing things. They're either going to end in an O or an A. Active becomes activo. Creative, creativo. Don't forget that B sound when you see the V. This makes you sound a lot more Spanish. That's what you're going to hear as well when you hear people talk. Okay. Objective, objetivo. There's a couple of exceptions here. Sensitive, sensible. Not sensible. Okay. Extensive, extenso. So those are kind of useful words. I mean, semi-useful words, those 2 there. But we'll make some sentences with the most useful ones on the list. And I'm going to give you masculine and feminine. Okay, first of all, first sentence, we're going to say, she is a very active person. Here we go. So in English, she is a very active person. How would you say that? She is, ella es, or you could just say es, una persona muy activa. Why activa? Why not activo? Well, because we're talking about her. Okay, it's describing her as active. It's a describing word. So although I've got all O's over here, they're going to be A's when we're talking about a woman. Okay, we're going to do an exception here because this is a word that comes up, and it's the word sensitive. The topic is sensitive. Sensitive. So the word for the topic is actually el tema. Think of the theme. And I know it ends in A, but this is an exception. That's why it's called el tema and not la tema. Okay? This is a word that's also very, very useful. That's why I'm giving it to you. When you're talking about a topic or a subject, you can always say el tema, the theme. El tema es, let's say very, muy, and it's not sensitivo, it's sensible. This is going to come up if you speak Spanish. You're going to need the word sensitive, sensible. You're going to hear it a lot too and be like, does that mean sensible? No, it's a false friend. It's a false match. Sensible does not mean sensible. It means sensitive. That's why I'm giving it to you. It's very, very useful. Okay, so the topic is very sensitive. El tema, not la tema. El tema es muy sensible. You could also say, she is a sensitive person. Es una persona muy sensible. And that doesn't mean that she's sensible. Okay, when you see that written down or you hear someone say that, you're going to think they're saying she's very sensible. And you're going to be like, but that doesn't match the conversation we were just having. Sensible is not sensible, it's sensitive. Before we move on, you might be thinking, well, why isn't there an A at the end of sensible? Because it ends in an E, these words never change. Okay? If they end in an E, they never change to male or female. They can't, because you can't change the E male or female like you can with an O or an A. Okay, these might be the easiest ones. Posible, possible. Terrible, terrible. Responsible, responsable. Okay, there's a little bit of a difference there. In fact, isn't responsible with an A? Nah, that doesn't look right. Responsible, responsable. So sometimes they change slightly. Durable, durable. cable. Okay? Cable. So these match very well. The exceptions are to understand is not understand, okay, in Spanish. That's why this is obviously an exception. It's comprender or entender. Comprensible, understandable. Recognizable, reconocible. Predictable, it's predecible. This is actually quite interesting because if you think about it, predictable, what does dict mean? Not in the way that you're thinking. Dictionary, dictation, it's to say something, right? It's to talk. And in Spanish, that's decir. Decir, dict. So predictable actually means pre-sayable. You can say it before it happens. Pre-sayable. And it's the same in Spanish. So that's pretty interesting. Pre-sayable. In other words, before it happens, you can actually say what's going to happen because you know. That's why we say predictable. I knew it was going to happen and I said so. Right, the word for comfortable, don't think it's confortable. You actually can say confortable, but nobody does. Instead, they choose to use this other word for comfortable, which is cómodo. Accent is on the O. This is a very useful word. We're going to do it in the test, so please memorize that. Cómodo, not comodo, because there's an accent on the first O. Right, so incredible is they remove that D, and it's instead of incredible, it's increíble. Affordable, this is not a very, very useful word. Asequible. And stable, estable. There's that leading E again before the S. All right, one thing I want to say about these, they're super easy because they pretty much sound like English, actually. A lot of people know the word posible, impossible. Or impossible should be on this list as well. Impossible. I'll add that in for you. Now, that should be on the side, hey? So one thing I want to say, I have a student. Don't be like him. You know who you are if you're watching this video. He says, now we say possible, but Spanish is not possible. It's not cable. It's not cable. It's cable. You got to swap those words around. And I have a student, those letters around. I have a student who doesn't do that. Okay, I have a student, I'm always saying it's not possible. It's possible. Possible. And this applies for every single word in Spanish. You have to say each letter in order, one by one. If you think about it, in English, we're actually swapping the order of the letters around when we pronounce it. Possible. All right, and that's wrong in Spanish. It's not possible, it's possible. Very, very important. Cable, impossible. All right? Okay. Let's do some practice sentences. Okay, first practice sentence. Are you comfortable? Don't get tripped up by the false friend. It's not confortable. Are you comfortable? Estás is are you. Cómodo. You might hear this quite a lot, right? If you, I don't know, at a hotel, maybe at a restaurant, the waiter might ask you that. ¿Estás cómodo? Question mark. Question mark. Again, there should be a leading question mark at the beginning, upside down in Spanish. Don't worry about that too much. That if your keyboard doesn't have it, because it doesn't change the meaning at all. No problem. Okay, next sentence is going to be, it's impossible to find a cable. Impossible to find. The word for find is encontrar. Encontrar. So we got two of them here, huh? It's impossible. Es imposible. To find is encontrar. Un cable. So, a plug-in cable, un cable, a cable. Okay, so whenever you see BLE in English, it's going to be the same word in Spanish. And when that doesn't happen, it's one of these exceptions here that you should memorize. You've made it to the end. This is the last one. But don't... You've made it to the end. This is the last one. But don't switch off yet, because this one, it's aptly at the end, because we have some that are nouns, some that are adjectives, okay? And some that can be crossed over between the two. So, for example, the product, clearly that's a thing, right? The product. So, el producto. And that is going to be always blue, always masculine, el producto. But exact, that's not a thing, right? You can say the exact something, because there's a thing behind it. It's describing a thing. This exact glass. Exact is describing the glass, believe it or not. So sometimes that's going to change to an A if you're talking about an exact feminine thing, right? That exact woman would be exacta. Now, you can see words like correct. Your answer is correct, okay? Correcto. That's describing the answer. Perfect. This is perfect. This glass is perfect. The woman is perfect. They're different. One's going to be male, one's going to be female. So the man is perfect would be el hombre es perfecto. And the woman is perfect. La mujer es perfecta. So this is a bit of a mix. For some reason, words that end in CT, some of them are nouns and some of them are describing words, adjectives. Okay. So just be aware of that and look at the sentence, and we'll do a couple sentences now before you decide if it's going to end in an O or an A. As a side note, I think all of the CT words that are nouns, that are things, they end in O's. The product. What else do we have? The effect. That's a noun. The prospect. That's a noun. The convict. That's a noun. The object. The district. The contract. The suspect. So all of these are nouns. All of these nouns are male, masculine. And when it comes to, I think, these ones, just these three, or maybe these four, these are adjectives. Okay, so these ones will change from male to female. The rest will stay the same. Okay, let's do some practice sentences. All right, let me just quickly run you by these exceptions. Object is not objecto. It's not objecto. That's kind of impossible to say, which is probably why it's not like that. It's objeto. Okay? Objeto. The object, el objeto. The district is not districto. It's el distrito. Distrito. The contract, el contrato, not contracto. Like correcto, but not contracto, it's contrato. And the suspect is a very, very different word. If you watch any Spanish TV, there's always a suspect, and you'll hear this word a lot. Sospechoso, el sospechoso. Let's do some practice sentences. All right, I sign the contract tomorrow. Whoopsie, I sign the contract. Sign is firmar. Sign the contract tomorrow. Okay, what's that going to be? I sign. So, if firmar is to sign, I sign is firmo. Yo firmo, I sign. El contrato, it's an exception, but I gave this to you because it's actually a pretty useful word. Mañana. I mean, if you are like, let's say you move to a Spanish-speaking country, you're going to be signing contracts for your internet, your TV, whatever. Mañana. Yo firmo el contrato mañana. And this word sign I use specifically because it's very important. People are going to say, sign here, please. Una firma, firma aquí. So, yo firmo el contrato mañana. All right, let's do another one. Okay, we're going to say, if someone says, how is your food? You're going to say, the food is perfect. So that's going to be, la comida is the food. Está. Está, think of está as in is right now. Is right now. La comida está. Right now the food is. As opposed to in general, the food is perfect. That would be different. La comida es. But está is right now. Perfect. What is it? Perfecto or perfecta? Well, we're talking about la comida. Everything ends in A, so this should end in A as well. La comida está perfecta. Gracias. Gracias to the waiter. Okay, if you said la comida está perfecta, you are correcto. All right, anytime you need to translate a word that ends in CT in English, it's going to be CTO or CTA in Spanish. Very, very easy. Guys, you've done it. You've got to the end. Okay, what's next? A quick summary. We actually ended up doing 18 of these, okay? The TIONs are look at the bottom. These are the biggest ones, okay? There's the most of those. And the SIONs, in my opinion, they kind of carry on from there. So definitely the most of them are all wrapped up in the cion sound. And then we have anything ending in RY is Rio. Al remains al. T remains dad. Let's start again. Okay, so what have we learned? So shin and sion are by far the most. I would almost put sion, the SION, in the same category, right? It's the same sound. So by far, look at that. We have the most of those. There's a lot of those words. All right, anything ending in re becomes rio. Al remains al. And look how many there are of those, quite a lot. T changes to dat. That's kind of like the biggest change if you look across here. It's a very odd change. So is li and mente, naturally, naturalmente. 8 becomes an AR verb. Activate, activar. Fi or fi, simplify, becomes ficar, becomes an AR verb as well. Both of these do. There's quite a lot of those. Es, famous, becomes oso or osa. Ik becomes ico. Pretty much the same. You can kind of guess that one if you've never learned Spanish. Same goes for important, importante. You can basically speak Spanish if you know these words in English. All right, and then from the important, the NT, we get the NCE sound. Basically the same thing. Importante, importancia. Okay, the ORs remain ORs. They have feminine versions. Inventora, directora as well. Isms become masculine words. Ismo. And ist is very related. Anything that has an ism at the end can also have an ist at the end, right? Nationalism can always become nationalist. And then you would stick to the feminine sound in Spanish. So all of these remain ista, 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 even if you're talking about a male. All right, nearly at the end. So Iv becomes Ivo or Iva, depending. And then these ones are basically just English words with a different accent. Possible, possible. Remember, don't say possible. And then lastly, ict or act becomes acto or acta. And all in all, that's going to give you access to thousands, over 3,000, I believe, words. And many of those words are going to be inside the top 300, okay? And if they're not in the top 300, they're in the top 1,000. That's still great because there's a lot of these edge cases when you're speaking where you'll just need a word and you won't know the word, but you'll guess it because you've done this session, you've looked at this video, and most importantly, you've gone over the flashcards, which is what you should go and do now. The flashcards and the cheat sheets, go and ingrain this into long-term memory. And that way, when you're searching for one of these words, you won't have to look very far. It'll be right there as soon as you want to say it. If you have not joined the layers method, remember there's 2 links in the description. The one is for the free version. It's going to give you the first couple of layers so you can see if you like it. If it works for you, you'll get the flashcards and the cheat sheets and you'll see if the method works for you. And the other link is for the paid version, the full version with every layer that gets you from beginner to a 10-minute conversation and then beyond, and keeps giving you new layers every couple of weeks as we release new layers like this one. So that'll be the second link below this video. Please share this video if you think somebody else will find it useful. And if you haven't, the most important video you can watch on this channel is the one about the 8 magical words. I'll try and link it in this video. It doesn't always work, but if you can't see it, go to my channel and find the 8 magical words. That video